Hi everyone, my name is Kat, or the Fairy Librarian, and welcome to another video. Today I will be sharing my February TBR with you guys. I will go over some stats first and then go into the books. So if you don't care about stats and want to go straight into the books, feel free to skip ahead. But in the month of February, I read 8 books, good for a total of 2,279 pages. 2 of those were DNFs, and one of those was on my 24 books to read in 2024, which means that I've now read 3 out of the 24 books, which is one behind schedule, but there is one that I did start in February. I just wasn't able to finish, so it's fine. The type of book, 6 were prose novels, 1 was a short story, and 1 was a graphic novel. 6 of the books were physical reads, but I also had 2 ebooks. In terms of genre, I had 1 thriller, 1 sci-fi, 1 romance, 2 mystery, and 3 fantasy. While it is not atypical that fantasy is my most read genre for the month, I am a little bit surprised because I felt like I was reading a lot of other stuff that weren't fantasy, but I did still read 3 fantasy books, which I'm happy about. The intended audience, most of the books I read were intended for adults, but there was 1 middle grade as well. 5 books were on my TBR. 3 of them were mood reads. So I am reading my TBRs, which is good. I read half of the books in Dutch, half of them in English. In terms of pages, it's 1,100 in Dutch and 1,179 in English. So the ones that I read in English were slightly longer, but it's the same amount of books. Most of the books I read were part of a series. I had 1 first book in a series. I finished 1 series, and then there were 4 books that were companions to other books that I've read, but there were also 2 standalones. Something a little atypical for me is that all the books were written by an author that I've read something from before. Like 5 of those were because they were sequels or at least continuations of series that I have read from. So I like to kind of separate that out because it's sort of a different type of author I've read from before, because if it's in this category, it means that this series is the only series I've read by them, but so it's not the first book I read by them. I had 2 books by authors that I liked in the past, and I had 1 book from an author where it says it hit or miss in the graph, but that's not fully reflective of what it actually is, because I only read 1 book earlier, but I had mixed feelings about that one, so that's why I put hit or miss. As usual, most of my books came from the library, 6 out of the 8, but I did own 2 of the books that I read, so I am reading books that I own, which is good. And then the ugliest graph of the month is my ratings. I already said that I had 2 DNFs, which were not in this graphs, but I also had 2 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, and 2 5 stars, which results in this monstrosity of a graph. So those were the stats. Let's get into the books. In previous months, I've done them from my least favorite to my most favorite, but I kind of grew tired of ranking them, so I'm just going to go over them in the order that I read them in. So the first book that I read was Bring Me Back by B.A. Paris. This is a thriller about a man whose wife died and then, or like disappeared, and then he is now living with, or is now married to his previous wife's or girlfriend, I'm not sure if they were married, sister. But then things start happening that may suggest that the previous wife slash girlfriend, I'm not sure, is still alive. So this was the author that I mentioned the stats that I had read something from before, but I had mixed feelings. I read The Therapist by her, and like I had a fun time with it, but it was quite forgettable, and it's not one that I would necessarily recommend. And once again, this one I DNF'd. It was just very bland. The characters were incredibly flat. I DNF'd it a little under 20% because I just didn't care. But I looked up some spoilers, and like the twist was so painfully obvious, like from page 1. So yeah, I don't think that B.A. Paris is the author for me. I won't read any of her books. Because just, I don't know, they're not my thing. So yeah, this I DNF'd. Then I read Jade City by Fonda Lee, the third and final book in the Greenbone saga. I could not put this down. This was so good. I thought it was a really good ending for the trilogy. There was one point that I got a little bit nervous because we were getting close to the end and still so much had to happen. But Fonda Lee really pulled it off, which I thought was really well done. There were some emotional moments in it that like it made me cry, which doesn't happen very often, and it surprised me because I was more invested in these characters than I thought I was. So it was really, really well done. And just the ending was so beautiful and so appropriate. I think there will be people who maybe don't like the very end because they maybe think that it's not super satisfying, or like one plot thread doesn't end super satisfying, but I think it was beautiful and appropriate. And I really, really liked it. There were a lot of flashbacks in this, which I didn't always love because some of them didn't add very much. They just like broke the tension and the momentum. There was especially one scene where there was this flashback that just went on, and I just wanted to go back to like the present time because it was a really intense moment, and the flashback didn't really add anything. So I wish that some of those were removed. So I didn't love that, but I do think it's a great ending to this series. I highly recommend the entire trilogy. I think the whole is so much bigger than the sum of its parts. Like none of these books individually are an all-time favorite for me, but the series as a whole, I think, has the potential to be. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I definitely do recommend. Then I read The Twyford Code by Janice Hallett. This is a mystery book about this man who so it's made up of transcripts of audio recordings of this man who investigates this book by an author called Edith Twyford, who supposedly left a lot of clues in her books that leads to something. And one time when he was a kid, because they're children's books, his teacher was talking about these books, and they went on a field trip with school to the cottage where this author lived, and her teacher disappeared there, never to be seen again. And so now he wants to figure out what happened to this teacher. And so I read The Mysterious Case of the Albertan Angels in January, and I was really, really impressed by it. And once again, I think that the Twyford Code is really well thought out and well plotted and well put together. I'm like, Janice Hallett has this particular style and almost like a formula that at least like the two books that I've read by her had in common. But I like it, so I don't mind. They're both mixed media, and in both of them I am not entirely sure whether I fully love the mixed media. But then by the end, it makes total sense why it is the way it is, which I think is great. She uses the potential of mixed media really well. And also here, there are transcripts of audio fragments, but they're like automatic, like automatically transcribed. So like dialect words are often, or like where her accent, or his accent I should say, where his accent makes a word sound like another word, the transcript also picks the wrong one. Like for example, must have is like musta, so it makes mustard or something like that. There are instances like that, which I thought would make it really hard to read, but you get used to it pretty fast. And it did annoy me throughout reading it, but at the end, I understand why the dialect was kept. And just overall, I was very intrigued by this story. I wanted to know what happened. I read this in a single day. I could not put this down. And it's just the ending blew my mind. Not in the way that's like a dun 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 twist you never see coming, because that's not how Hallett writes. She like slowly reveals stuff, and she like leaves a lot of clues that everything does make sense and you can guess it yourself. But the reason it blew my mind is because it was just so much bigger and more, and there were so many layers to it that I, just like in The Mysterious Case of the Albertan Angels, that was also the case. And I just, yeah, I really, really like it. Thinking back about it, I have really, it's really good. But throughout reading it, like, the narrative style was a little frustrating, even though I understand now why it was done that way, and now I'm impressed. But throughout reading it, it was a little bit frustrating, so that did lower my experience at the time. But yeah, this is the thing that I also had with The Mysterious Case of the Albertan Angels. I appreciate them and I'm really impressed at the end of them. But throughout reading them, I have issues. So I gave this 4 stars because I did enjoy The Mysterious Case of the Elvish Angel a little bit more than this one. But yeah, I really want to read The Appeal. But I'm a little sad that I now have only The Appeal and then there's like a Christmas novella left by her. And I have to wait until she publishes another book. So yeah, I do want to read that somewhere this year. Then I read a comic called New York, New York, and it was by Philippe Pelaz Lapalbing and Florent Daniel. This is the first album in the Parallel series. It's a duology, and I didn't like this. Part of it is my fault. I should have looked up what this was about, or like looked up into more detail what this was about, because it is zombie story, which is not my thing. But even then, I don't think it was that well executed. The illustrations were very confusing and it was kind of hard to tell what exactly was going on most of the time. And so yeah, also you just get thrown into it and things aren't explained, and you just need to go along with it. And I can get behind that if I'm intrigued enough and interested enough in the rest, and it just wasn't the case. So I also didn't have this about a third of the way through, unfortunately. Then I read An Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn. I was a little nervous going into this because I really liked the first Bridgerton book, but the second one was such a big disappointment. I really disliked it. So I was a little scared that this one would be that as well. But I'm happy to report that it wasn't, that I really enjoyed this. This was a Cinderella retelling. And so we have Sophie, who is the bastard daughter of a count, question mark. And when the count marries, then we have like her stepmother and the daughters of the count's wife, because she lives at his house as his prodigy, because he tells people that she's the daughter of a friend of him that died. Like everyone knows that she's his daughter, but like people just go along with it. But then the father dies, and you know, Cinderella. And at the ball she meets Benedict Bridgerton, and romance happens. The retelling part is only the beginning. Then it goes another direction. But I thought that the retelling part was really well done. I like the changes that they made to the story that like made a lot of sense. So I think that was really good. I liked Sophie and Benedict as a couple. They were cute. There is technically a power dynamic because Sophie is a servant, because that's what her stepmother made her, and Benedict is a gentleman. And so we have this power dynamic that is present, but I think is handled pretty well, like especially for Julia Quinn, because she is known for having some consent issues sometimes. But yeah. But my favorite part of the series are the family relations the family dynamics between the Bridgertons and those were also very present in here. We got to see the younger siblings, which we didn't get a lot of in the previous two books, so I really liked that. Also, Lady Whistledown was really well done here. She was used to show things that we wouldn't see because we only have Sophie's and Benedict's POV, and so things that they weren't there but are kind of relevant to the story, or just seeing what happens to some other characters that are relevant to the story. I really like that. I hope Julia Quinn keeps using Lady Whistledown like that in the following books, because in the first two it was more like the parts by Lady Whistledown were also about the main couple. So I hope that this was just Julia Quinn really discovering the potential that she had with Lady Whistledown and just using it to the full capacity. I think I know who Lady Whistledown is. I'm not gonna say it because I don't want to spoil it if I'm right, but I think I know who she is, and I'm excited to read on and see if I'm right. Also, just the very ending. So you had the ending of like the couple and all the like different plot threads that I thought was really nice and really appropriate, and I really liked it. But then like the very, very end, like the last page, was about Lady Whistledown, and what happened there makes me really excited to continue on with the series. So it probably won't be long until you see book 4 appear on the channel, but I gave An Offer from a Gentleman 4.5 stars. Then I read a short story that was a prequel to one of my favorite books of last year, and that is About a Gnome by Jeff McIntyre. The book is The Garden Gnome. This short story was incredible. I went in with slightly low expectations because it's a prequel, which I don't always love. It's a short story, which I don't always love. But this was incredible. So we get the origin story of the gnomes. We get a myth retelling of the myth of Prometheus, when all the animals and living creatures are created, and so also the gnomes are the spirits of the earth, and then he also creates the spirit of water, of air, and of fire. But it's not a myth retelling in the way that is popular now, because it does change a lot. It's not just, let's just tell the exact same story, but just from a different POV, but it is still the exact same story. We do change a lot. We mix elements from different stories together, also from different cultures, like the mythology from different cultures together. We have some like German mythology with some Greek mythology, and probably some other ones, but maybe ones that I don't know myself, so I didn't see. But yeah, I really like it. It contains some of the typical humor that Jeff McIntyre has that just really works for me. So yeah, I liked it. I gave it 5 stars. This was incredible. I highly recommend. Then I read a middle grade, which was Kidnap on the Safari Star by MJ Leonard and Sam Sedgman. This is the 3rd book in the Adventures on Trains series, which is a mystery series where that take place on trains. This one is set in Africa, so we have South Africa, Zambia, and Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken. And this was fun. This is probably my favorite in the series. Um, it dealt a lot with like animals and wildlife and protecting them, um, which, because that was such a big part, that meant that it took a while for the mystery to start. Um, but I didn't mind, because once the mystery started, it was really good. Um, Alex is a great main character once again. I liked that in this one. It's like a child detective, but the adults don't always take him very seriously, and he's like, "Oh, this is nothing for a kid. You go play." Um, but the narrative, and there were some adults, like he got enough freedom and agency to still go on an adventure while also having the adults on the train act realistically. I think it struck that balance really, really well. Um, the case itself is like, I felt a lot of the influence from Murder on the Orient Express, a lot more than in the previous two books. Um, and so I liked that, but I really liked the ending. Um, I didn't guess it. I guessed part of it. I guessed the who, but not the how. Um, so yeah, I did really like it. There were so many components to the ending. Um, I really love this. This is my favorite one in the series so far. As I said, um, I gave this 5 stars. And then the final book that I read in the month of February is Mort by Terry Pratchett. I actually don't have a ton to say about this one. I liked it. I really enjoyed it. I've never disliked a Discworld book. Like, the plot was fun. I liked the characters. I really liked to take a look behind the scenes with death. Um, but like, it's not my favorite Discworld. Um, like, I liked Equal Rights a lot more, but it's not the worst Discworld book either. Um, so yeah, I had a fun time. That's it. I didn't think it was that funny. Like, other Discworld books were a lot funnier to me personally. But humor is very subjective, obviously. I gave it 4 stars. I had a fun time. That's about it. So, those were the books I read in February. I'll give you my book of the month, which was About a Gnome, the short story that I read. It was so, so good. So that was the video. If you read any of these books, let me know what you thought about them, and let me know what your favorite book of February was, and I will see you again in another video. Bye!